Happy New Year, everybody! Let's close out 2021 by looking at everything Lantern related that happened in the month of December, starting with the release of Green Lantern number 9. This issue finally answered some of the biggest questions we've had since the beginning of the run. How satisfying those answers are is going to depend on a number of factors, and I encourage you to tell me your take on it in the comments. And while you're at it, go listen to the Lantern Cast episode 461, where Chad, Mark, and I talk about the issue. And according to my Comixology subscription, Green Lantern number 10, which was originally supposed to come out on January 4th, has been pushed back to January 18th. After last month's Suicide Squad number 9 left me disappointed, a few different people told me that the series is actually pretty good, and it was just a bad place to jump in. So I decided to check out issue 10, and this issue does a much better job of spotlighting the personalities and backstories of the team. There isn't nearly as much cringy ambush bug humor, and the Green Lantern stuff was more enjoyable. I like seeing Joe capture the squad by making a giant kaiju that eats them and holds them in its stomach. We know she's a geek, so that's a level of personal expression that goes a long way in a book like this where she only really gets to show up for a page or two. And the revelation that part of their mission was to break Black Hand out of his science cell was a nice surprise. Last I remember seeing him was back during Hal's days with the long hair and trench coat. I'm still left with the feeling that the way this story is paced doesn't leave enough room for a cast this large and all of the tie-ins, but it doesn't look like that's going to end anytime soon, as there's going to be a pretty big crossover between the Suicide Squad, the Crime Syndicate, and the Titans coming in March. The storyline is called War for Earth 3, and is running through Suicide Squad number 13, The Flash number 780, Teen Titans Academy number 13, and is bookended by War for Earth 3 numbers 1 and 2. This seems like it could be pretty cool, and I like the fact that the same team of Robbie Thompson and Dennis Hopeless are co-writing every issue. You know, it should keep all of these tie-ins feeling like one big story. Plus, we're getting to see some more of the Emerald Knight, so who knows? If this crossover is as much fun as it looks right now, maybe this will be what finally sells me on this run of the Suicide Squad. Speaking of things I only read because of the Lantern connection, let's talk about Catwoman Lonely City number 2. This is a Black Label miniseries, meaning it can be a bit more adult in places, and it's also very firmly an Elseworld story that has nothing at all to do with continuity. This is by Cliff Chiang, an artist whose work I really enjoyed on New 52 Wonder Woman. Here though, he's doing pretty much everything. Writing, art, inking, coloring, lettering. Basically the only thing Cliff Chiang isn't doing himself is publishing the book. And I like that for a change. It gives me a feeling that I usually only get from indie comics, where one super dedicated creator has to figure out how to do it all just to get their vision out there. Everything about this book is incredibly good on both a technical and creative level. The story is like a breath of fresh air to anyone who's tired of the way mainstream superhero comics deal with character ages and the passage of time. The premise here is that one fateful night, the age of masked heroes and villains in Gotham came to a bloody end, and then we pick up 10 years later, following Selina Kyle as she's released from prison and has to acclimate to the city she left behind, which has changed so much without her. She's dealing with the weight of the loss that haunted her for the last decade, and the feeling of being a stranger in her own neighborhood. And on top of all that, Selina is driven by one final mission, Bruce's dying words, compelling her to retrieve something from the Batcave. Except the security is armed, and nobody's been able to get inside for a decade. One last big heist against the best security Batman could muster, coming at the worst time of her life. Selina is 10 years older now. She cannot physically do all of the things that she used to rely on to get by as Catwoman. Her strength, agility, flexibility, stamina, the skill set that she had always relied on to survive has diminished and will never fully come back. And she has nothing left to fall back on. Which brings us to the ring. Selina decided to steal Alan Scott's ring and battery from its vault at Star Labs. Since the ring can do things like teleport and let you walk through walls, it's the perfect tool to enter and exit the cave. But while the ring is in perfect shape, all that's left of the battery is a few shards. We don't know what happened to it, or if the rest of it still exists somewhere, but this pretty much ruins Selina's plans to sidestep the cave's defenses. And just to twist the knife a little, when Star Labs sent out some Rocket Reds to catch her and retrieve the ring, Selina accidentally used up the last bit of power in the ring to teleport herself to safety. She didn't even know there was anything left in the ring, and it would have been enough to at least get her into the cave. But just like that, it was gone, the last dying embers burning out. She still has the ring and the battery fragments, so it's possible this will come back, but I don't really think so. This is a story about the old guard of Gotham's masked vigilantes trying to make their way in a city that outgrew them a long time ago. So throwing back to the Golden Age Green Lantern, who protected Gotham when Batman's dad was still a kid, is a really nice touch. Plus, getting to watch a plan fail as the dying embers of a once powerful costumed hero burn out is pretty on-the-nose symbolism for how Selina views her current situation. Also, if you didn't know, the Rocket Reds themselves are a Green Lantern reference. Their origin story is that one time, Kilowog came to Earth and communism reminded him of his homeworld, so he built a fleet of Iron Man suits for the Russian military. That's how we got the Rocket Reds! The only reason I picked this up at all is because Alan Scott's Green Lantern ring is front and center on the variant cover, but I am so very glad I took a shot on this book. It's only 4 issues, and the first 2 are great. If I did any kind of best comics of 2021 list, this would be near the top. I cannot recommend it enough. Issue 3 is supposed to come out in March, so you have plenty of time to catch up, and I can't imagine you'll regret it. DC vs. Vampires number 3 came out, and this series is quickly becoming something I didn't expect, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. The overall premise of the whole thing is that there's been a shakeup in the leadership of vampire society, and the new big boss vampire has decided to declare war against humanity, and has been secretly turning key people into vampires to make the human race easier to defeat, and basically win the war before the other side even knows there is a war. Villains, by their nature, tend to be secretive and go underground between jobs, so it's easier for vampires to pick them off without anyone noticing. But a select handful of heroes have already been turned and used as sleeper agents to keep the rest of the superhero community off the trail, while also turning other key heroes into vampires, as well as killing any other heroes who'd pose a significant threat. We know that the vampires have Zatanna on their side, which by itself could be catastrophically huge, but their main sleeper agent seems to be Hal Jordan. Anytime there's a powerful target that has to be eliminated, Hal gets sent in, and handling the League is left solely up to him, which makes sense. He's high enough up the superhero ladder that he has access to pretty much everyone and everything. He's incredibly powerful, and his ring allows him a unique protection from the sun so he can move around in daylight without giving anything away. But the ring is where the problems start. And it was innocent enough at first. The ring's force field can filter out the sun's rays that are harmful to vampires. Okay, that's fine. But then they outright say that you have to die to become a vampire, which begs the question, why didn't Hal's ring leave him? Still, not a deal breaker, because I would absolutely believe it if you told me that Hal Jordan had enough willpower to force the ring to stay, despite it trying to leave and seek a replacement. It'd just be nice for the story to make some sort of comment about it. Still though, we're in the realm of what's reasonable. We're pushing it, but we're still okay. Then issue 3 happens, and Wonder Woman uses some basic logic and gut instinct to figure out Hal is a vampire, and even traps him in her magic lasso. So Hal uses his ring to give himself hypnosis vision, so he can hypnotize Wonder Woman into letting him bite her and turn her into a vampire. There was a point in the early Silver Age where Hal's ring could pretty much do whatever the writers wanted with no rules at all, and it feels like DC vs. Vampires is creeping back into that territory. In issue 2, Hal kills Barry because the Flash would be too big a threat to the vampires if left alive, and he would actually consume the food supply too fast if they turned him into a vampire. And this death was believable to me because Hal was able to use their close friendship to manipulate Barry into a trap. But what happened with Wonder Woman, that feels like someone writing their super cool original character who can beat anybody. And it speaks to a tonal problem that's been getting worse as DC vs. Vampires goes on. There's an almost whimsical nature to this book, and I don't think it's intentional. I think we're supposed to feel a mounting tension as more heroes fall, and the ones who do know what's going on can't afford to trust anyone. And I'm pretty sure everything Hal says and does is supposed to be confident and intimidating, but it just comes off as kind of goofy. He's so casual and laid back and keeps pulling new ring abilities totally out of nowhere. It doesn't feel like the character is threatening so much as it feels like he has plot armor. Like the story needs him to take out this character who should probably be able to stop him, so here's the wacky way he'll defeat them without even trying that hard. And moments like the hypnosis can't come off as creative or clever because we're no longer working within the known rules of what this character can do, which means any confrontation with Hal is going to feel futile and uneventful because he can just do literally anything, whether it makes sense or not. Wonder Woman working it out that Hal Jordan is a secret vampire sleeper agent and then fighting him alone on a beach could and should be an awesome scene. Instead, it gives me doubts about the rest of the series, but hopefully I'm making something out of nothing. So the Human Target number 3 came out, and it focused quite a bit on Guy Gardner, and boy has it rubbed some people the wrong way. And for good reason. It portrays Guy as a violent, possessive ex-boyfriend who stalks Ice, insisting to her face that he loves her while talking shit about her behind her back. It's not a good look, and it's wildly different from the Guy Gardner we've come to know in the modern era of Green Lantern, pretty much since the start of the Geoff Johns run in 2005. But believe it or not, I don't think this is that big of a deal. Tom King writes two very different kinds of books for DC. Books that are very explicitly happening within the continuity of the DC universe, like his Batman run and the amazingly good Darkseid War one-shot starring Hal Jordan, and books that I guess you could make fit into continuity if you really wanted to, but they were never meant for that, like Mr. Miracle and Strange Adventures. And maybe Tom King said something on Twitter or in an interview somewhere that totally invalidates this. But after reading the first 3 issues of The Human Target, there's really no doubt in my mind that this book is its own thing. This Guy Gardner isn't supposed to be the modern Guy Gardner we know. This is the person Guy Gardner could have grown into if life after the Justice League International had gone differently. At first, I misunderstood what this miniseries was. I saw the art style, and I knew that the Justice League International would be in the story, so I assumed that it was a period piece set in the 1980s. But issue 1 shows characters filming things on smartphones, hitting us in the face with the fact that it takes place present day. Over the next 2 issues, former members of the Justice League International talk about their time with the League as being something that happened years ago. And with Ice as our guide, we start to revisit the old team one member at a time, and it quickly clicks into place what kind of story this actually is, and why it can't take place in the main continuity. There have been a lot of Justice League teams, each with their own mission and vibe, but none of them were quite like this one. What started out as just another team of superheroes quickly evolved into a found family, full of best friends and lovers all having the best years of their lives together. But time goes on, and things change, and people grow apart, and before we know it, our glory days are behind us, and we're out in the world without our closest friends. And we change. Reconnecting with people you were so close to so long ago can really go either way. Sometimes it's a great experience, like finding out Booster Gold is the same goofy optimist that you remember. He's still his own biggest fan, and his latest get-rich-quick scheme is to open up a bagel shop in a strip mall. And you spend the afternoon talking and catching up, and it feels just like the good old days. If a little sad because you know it'll be over as soon as that afternoon is. But not everyone can be like Booster. Guy Gardner went in the other direction. Guy peaked in his glory days, and still holds on to them as tightly as possible. He's never allowed himself to move on, to build anything new for himself, and he lets the authority granted him by his job as Earth's Green Lantern to dilute himself into believing he's on top of everything. That he's a big deal, that things are just like they always were. It's caused him to grow into someone angry, jealous, and possessive. Someone who never would have been able to make those friends and have those glory days in the first place. And the thing is, this isn't a total reinvention of Guy's character. The seeds of this person were always there back in the 1980s, but especially in the Justice League International. That book was a workplace comedy as much as it was a superhero series, and everyone's personalities were heightened, their traits dialed up so it'd be more fun to see them bounce off of each other. Guy was there to cause conflict. He was crude and picked fights all the time. He did have moments of genuine niceness and sincerity, usually with Ice, but he's still the same Guy Gardner who'd be a jerk to her and thought it'd be a good idea to ask her out on a date and not tell her they'd be going to a porno theater. Even the part at the end of the issue, where Guy gives up his ring and turns it over to who he thinks is Hal Jordan out of fear of Hal's authority, even that's rooted in their Silver Age relationship, since Hal has in fact taken Guy's ring away before. They clashed constantly, until one day Hal and Guy finally had a knockdown, drag-out fist fight, and the loser had to give up their ring. After a pretty brutal struggle, Guy lost, and Hal took his ring away. And he didn't rip the ring off Guy's finger either. He made Guy take it off himself and hand it over, adding humiliation to the moment, really driving home the defeat. Does it make sense for Guy to be afraid of Hal Jordan? Yeah, it does. Because in that moment, Hal represented the complete failure of everything Guy had ever told himself to prop himself up and feel important. No matter how high Guy Gardner climbs, there's always someone above him ready to knock him back down. And eventually, after a lot of growing pains, he was able to become the kind-hearted person we know today. He still has a mean streak, but he's much more level-headed than he used to be, largely because he's figured out how to have healthy relationships with the people in his life. The Human Target presents us with a different path Guy could have walked. One where his personal growth was stunted, and the only thing that makes him feel big is the authority given to him by his job. So when someone else with that same job comes along and pulls rank on him, all of that bravado crumbles away, because he can't pretend to be a big deal anymore. And suddenly he's back to being sad and alone with nothing but the glory days that he never let go of. I'm not saying you have to like this version of Guy Gardner. Hell, I don't like this version of Guy Gardner. But that's okay, because this isn't the mainline continuity version of Guy. This is just the version of Guy that makes sense for this particular story, that occupies its own little bubble off by itself. The next time we get to spend time with Guy in a Lantern book, he won't be anything like this. A few quick ones before we wrap up. Justice League Incarnate number 1 shows us that DC does in fact have its own version of Thanos. His name is Tartarus, he's from Earth 8, which is based on the Marvel Universe, and he wears armor made of melted down lantern rings. Dark Knights of Steel number 1 tells the story of an alternate version of the DC Universe set in a high fantasy medieval world, in which Green Lantern and Green Arrow collaborate to assassinate Superman's father right in front of Batman. I'm sure that'll go great for them. Justice League Infinity number 6 gives us a little more screen time for Jorge, the alternate universe Green Lantern introduced a few issues ago, as well as a brief moment of Jorge and John Stewart teaming up to fight an alien god from another universe. There was also this very emotionally charged moment where John was forced to directly confront his lingering feelings for Hawkgirl, and feels like the kind of moment that'll propel these two characters forward if and when this universe gets to continue after the story wraps up next issue. Most of issue 6 is narrated by John, and that narration is illustrated by ring constructs, which is a nice storytelling device to make John central to the issue. Brian Michael Bendis had some announcements to make in his Substack newsletter. Among other things, he talks about the Justice League Annual for 2021, which is supposed to set up the Gold Lantern saga that will be happening in the Justice League vs. Legion of Superheroes miniseries. The annual was delayed due to what sounds like changes in the editorial staff, and will now be rebranded as the 2022 Annual when it finally releases. At this point, it looks like the annual might not come out until the beginning of February, which would be less than ideal, since the Justice League vs. Legion starts just a few days after this video comes out, but we'll have to wait to see what happens. Bendis also announced that he'll be working on a Legion of Superheroes adult animated TV series for HBO Max based on his Legion run with Ryan Sook. There really aren't any more details than that, as it's pretty early on, but this is good news if you're like me and you enjoyed the Bendis run of Legion comics. And hey, no promises, but now there's the potential to see the Gold Lantern in a cartoon, so cross your fingers. Now, coming up in March, we've got solicitations for Green Lantern number 12, which promises to end this first arc with a major status quo change for the Green Lantern Corps. We've got the continuation of the Gold Lantern saga over in Justice League vs. the Legion of Superheroes number 3. We've got that Crime Syndicate vs. Suicide Squad vs. Titan crossover that I talked about before. And the Human Target number 6 has a truly excellent Guy Gardner cover. Also, Jo may or may not be in Sensational Wonder Woman Special number 1. She's on the cover, but it's a variant cover, though it's an anthology, so maybe the variant cover corresponds to one of the stories in the issue, or it could mean nothing. Either way, I wish this was a real Justice League team. So that's the Green Lantern Roundup for December 2021. If you have something to say about any of these topics, or if there's anything you think I missed, let's keep the conversation going in the comments section down below. You can usually find me reacting to these developments in real time on Twitter, and I'll be back doing another one of these videos a month from now, so subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you're notified when that video drops. Until then, thank you for taking the time to watch. My name is Dan, we'll talk again soon.